Good evening. Good evening. Thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. I hope that you enjoyed that slideshow that was some pictures of our Huskies across all divisions taken last spring. So we thought we'd show that to you so you could get an idea both of what the lower school looks like if you haven't visited and the classrooms and the facilities, but also our gorgeous new middle school and our upper school as well. So hope you enjoyed that slideshow. And you'll see behind me, we aren't actually in a different time zone at Flint Hill. This is one of our digital backgrounds, and that's the Miller House on our lower school campus. So my name is Jennifer Webb, and I am the Director of Enrollment Management and Financial Aid at Flint Hill. And we're so glad that you're joining us for this virtual information session of the lower school. And I'll tell you a little bit about what we have in store for you this evening. But before I do, I'll mention a couple features here in our meeting today in Google Meet. I know that we're used to all of these, most of these platforms, but just in case you haven't used Google Meet specifically before, as we've all learned, for best sound quality during the event, it's best for us all to be muted. So if you see that microphone, you should be muted during the event. But that does not mean that we don't want you to engage, because we absolutely do. We're so glad you're here. We want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your comments. So please do use the chat feature that is in the Google Meet. It looks like a little box with some lines on it. So don't be shy about using that. And I'd like to introduce two of my other colleagues here tonight who will be helping me with the chat and getting questions back to you both in the chat and writing, and also posing questions verbally throughout the event. And that is Dawn Hopke, and she is our Associate Director, and she works with the lower school and focuses on grades JK to 6. And then we also have Rico Reed with us this evening, and he is a officer for the lower school, mostly focusing on grades 5 and 6. So other people that you'll hear from tonight in terms of the program, we have our headmaster of 17 years here with us tonight, and I'll introduce him in just a moment. We also have the lower school divisional leadership with us this evening, Robin Nichols and Megan Darr. We have a panel of parents, so you'll get to hear that current parent perspective from them, and we'll introduce them a little bit later when we get to the panel segment. And then finally, we will close with an admissions presentation. So next steps, whether it's next steps to learn more about Flint Hill, next steps to see Flint Hill, next steps for submitting the application and completing the admission process. So we will go over all of that as well. So again, thank you for being here. I'll be back at the end for the admission presentation and some during the panel too. And at this point, I'm going to turn it over to John Thomas, our headmaster.
Great. Thank you very much, Jennifer. And welcome to everybody. I admire you being online at 8 o'clock at night and hopefully having the kids in bed and everything. And hearing a title like headmaster, it may be a little off-putting, or you're going, what in the world is that? The way I always think about it, it actually came from a third grader who a lot of times, if we were doing this live, I would have been greeting you at the door and wishing you well. And then I would have come in and talked to you. And then a lot of times I would have been saying goodbye to you at the door. And I was doing that at an event we had, and a little girl, one of our students, was leaving with her aunt. And they were overheard going down the sidewalk where the aunt said, so who is that nice man at the door? She said, oh, that's Mr. Thomas. He's our school's mascot. So, it's whatever role we take, it's really important. And just like your role as parent is critically important. And if you're a parent like my wife, Emily, was, the two of us, we raised 3 great boys. We had 2 real unconditional rules we kept. One, we had to give them unconditional love. And the second was get them educated. And the whole idea about education is that's the people business. It's all about change and growth and all of that. And so I'd like to talk to you a bit about that process. And as you get to know us tonight, I hope you'll see that everything we do is very intentional, very deliberate, strategic, and safe, as you saw a lot of the pictures with masks and everything we're still doing to make sure we do our part to keep this COVID thing out of there. But I also want to talk to you about one of the key through lines. And Flint Hill has a number of through lines: our technology, our entrepreneurial spirit, our idea of relationships and all of that. But one of the key ones are our core values. So I'm going to try and share a slideshow with you, and I'm going to ask Jennifer to make sure this comes through. So bear with me for a second while I try and get this up there.
Okay, it shows that you're presenting. We see your slideshow.
Do I have
And
it?
now it's full screen. Looks great,
Okay,
John.
okay, great. And what I want to do is, the real mascot at Flint Hill is a husky. And we take being huskies very seriously. We actually use the Iditarod dog sled race in Alaska as a metaphor for our educational journey. And we talk about on that sled, we're all equal. No one's more important. Everybody on that sled, from the dogs to the musher to whatever, to make that kind of a race, you have to be a team and you have to be doing it together. And some days we know that's probably a breathtaking journey, and other days it's probably downright crazy and scary and frightening. Well, that's what school's like sometimes. And that's what life's like. And we talk to the kids about being huskies and doing that. And that's then that idea of blazing our trail, helping the kids find that path. So to give you some perspective on that, and that, to make sure you really do see that it's much more than us just giving you, admission rhetoric or whatever. The idea is we recognize you've got all kinds of options. You've got lots of other schools to look at, but I will tell you, if you see one independent school, you've seen one independent school. Each one has its own culture, its own ethos. And here I think we have a phenomenal sense of purpose and place in everything we do. And some of the teachers in that lower school are the very best I've ever seen in my long career. And as you look at us tonight, as you think about us, think about the benefits you would get as as parents, as having partners here at school in helping to raise these great kids, but also the benefits your children would get by being with these tremendous teachers. Because I will tell you, what they do in that classroom is absolutely unbelievable. It all comes down to making sure that the learning is active, engaging, it is truly personal and meaningful. It is something that we take very seriously. Of all the schools in my career, this has been the most student-centered. Everything we do comes down to what's in the best interest of the kids and what do we need to do for them. And that idea of curious, just to give you an example, a number of years ago, for a second grade activity, we had gotten a Native American family came and built a Native American village on our lower school campus. And the second grade got to come, and they were going to learning stations around the fields, to all the things, to learn about what it was like to be a Native American. And I happened to have come over that afternoon, and I decided to jump in with the second grade. And a little boy and I actually had the opportunity to sit on a log, and we had rocks, and we were scraping out the inside of that log with the idea eventually it was going to be turned into a canoe. And all of a sudden, a whistle blew, and it was time to go to another learning station. And we were going over to crush corn or whatever. And as we were going, he grabs my hand, and he is just, if you can imagine that enthusiasm of a second grader, he's just bouncing up and down and just goes, "God, Mr. Thomas, this is so cool. This is so much better than school." What I loved about that was this was school. This was Flint Hill. This is the way we teach. This is the way we do things. As I mentioned, our core values. For years, we had 4 very direct core values: honesty, respect, responsibility, and compassion. But when we really looked at ourselves in a process 2 years ago, we realized we're a school that is active. I mean, my gosh, we talk about momentum here all the time. We never believe in the status quo. We always know we can do what we do a little bit better. We also know we want to get better each and every day. I hope you have a great Tuesday and had a great Tuesday. I want Wednesday for all of us to be just a little bit better. And so the core values, we decided to change them and make them more action oriented, because they are truly at the heart of everything we do. And we begin teaching these with the kids from junior kindergarten, and they learn a thing called the Husky Promise and everything. But it goes through the lower school, to the middle school, to the high school. And it is something we constantly come back to about those core values. Now, just let me walk you through those just very quickly, because the idea of respect and value all equally, well, my gosh, that really informs the kind of person we are. It informs what we're going to do, how you're going to act, how you're going to interact with other people. And that is critical in today's world. And that idea of respecting and valuing all equally is something that we do hold dear to what we do, that sense of equity and inclusion, that idea of making certain that we truly do believe in having a very diverse community, not only in boys and girls and different learning styles, but different racial makeup, our different religions. If you've seen pictures of the inside of our buildings, we have the flags hanging on the wall. We have over 115 nationalities in our school family, between our faculty and staff, our families, and our alumni. And once a flag goes on the wall, it's up there forever. So that alum or that alum family can come back and see their flag, or as new families come, sometimes they're thrilled to see that their national flag is already hanging on that wall. The idea of lead and support with compassion, being kind to each other, making Flint Hill a welcoming place that anybody who walks in that building is going to be treated respectfully and warmly. And we really do make certain, particularly as new kids come at whatever grade level, that everybody reaches out to help them feel very much a part of the Flint Hill School family as quickly as possible. And part of that compassion comes with a level of passion for all we do, that we absolutely value passion over pressure. There are a lot of schools, and great schools with big reputations, that are pressure cookers. And I take pride in the fact that we say we are not a pressure cooker. And yet our kids ultimately at the end of the line will go to some of the top colleges and universities around the world. And yet we've been able to accomplish that because of the mentorship of their great faculty and the ability to know that they are with people who have their back, not only their classmates, but their teachers. And that whole sense of family, I think, is a huge benefit for anyone looking at a school. The idea of acting with integrity, that obviously comes down to making sure they're honest and everything. For my wife, Emily, and I, this was a big one for us when we were raising our kids. We would put up with a lot, but we better get integrity. And the idea of acting with integrity is not just knowing what that word means. It's about how we're going to do things. And in fact, as we went through the COVID process from the lockdown, a year and a half ago to all of last year, part of our commitment to acting with integrity was communicating with parents. In fact, we used the mantra that the three most important things we were going to do during the pandemic was communicate, communicate, and communicate, to make sure parents really knew what was happening with their children, because we had kids on campus all year last year, and then clearly coming into this year. And that communication, I think, developed an enormous sense of trust and understanding. And people really did have an appreciation for what our faculty was able to accomplish with those kids. Imagining what's possible, this is kind of where we took that word responsibility and took it a little further. Thinking about what we can do. When we went one-to-one, meaning all the kids in the lower school have their own device, an iPad. They don't use it all the time, but they learn appropriate use. They learn to use it as part of their sense of curiosity, their sense of creativity, their sense of communication, collaboration. All of it is doing that. It's from the imagining what's possible that had us build that incredible new middle school building a year ago that we opened. That is just the most incredible building. And I will tell you, the one advantage of wearing a mask every time I walk in there is the kids can't see my jaw drop open every time I step in that building. But imagine what's possible. I will tell you, a couple of years ago, we give an honor at commencement to our salutatorians and to our valedictorians. They're allowed to speak. 2 years ago, we had 2 salutatorians and 1 valedictorian. What I loved about the fact that those 3 kids got to stand up and speak, all 3 of them started their Flint Hill careers in the lower school, 2 of them in kindergarten, that they were true products of what Flint Hill was all about, and were heading off to amazing colleges and universities. All of this comes back to that idea of innovation, focus, caring, trying to find ways to get the kids to be creative in everything they do, and trying to get them to push themselves out of their own comfort zone. And that comes to them blazing the trail and figuring out what that means. Now, as the kids get older, clearly that'll get into things like what they're doing academically, that we teach engineering, for heaven's sakes. We teach coding starting in the lower school. We get the kids to pursue computer science. That we have an unmanned aerial competition team in the upper school who 3 years ago, the last 2 years it's been canceled, that many of the kids who were on that team came through our lower school, our middle school, developed a passion for learning, for science, for math. in a competition of 75 schools, 71 of which were college universities. Their engineering departments, Flint Hill came in second. Only 4 high schools were invited to be in the competition, 71 universities. And here a Canadian university wins it. We come in second. Behind us on the list of American schools, Stanford University, Harvard, Cornell, the U.S. Naval Academy. I will tell you 3 or 4 years ago, we came in second that year also. Virginia Tech, I will say, came in third, which everybody was thrilled about, another Virginia school. But I will tell you what I loved was the 3 leading engineering students on that team were Flint Hill graduates, and they were trying to knock off their high school and do that. All of this starts with our lower school. I'm going to be quite honest with you. The education that happens at the lower school level is where kids begin to develop a sense of confidence in themselves, a sense of purpose, an ability to push themselves and know they can make mistakes, and that a teacher is right there with them, that teacher will help them with whatever may come up. Now, I'm going to come back. Hopefully I'm back now. I will tell you, as I get ready to pass it on to Robin, one of the things that we also start talking about early on is our vision for students. Many of us have adopted it ourselves, but the vision is very simple and very direct. Take meaningful risks, be yourself, and make a difference. And for the young kids, it's the make a new friend. Go introduce yourself to that new student. Ask that child to come play with you over here. Try something in the classroom. Learn your Spanish. Learn to ask questions. Learn to get excited about different projects that come up in the innovation department or just in the class. Learn about yourself, but be yourself. Well, that's part of you and I working together, school and home. And then clearly we want them to make a difference, even at this youngest age. Last thing I will tell you, a couple years ago at closing ceremony, when we're saying goodbye and kids are heading off to the summer, a teacher noticed a little child, as everybody had been released and they're heading to the door and the summer vacation is going to start. This little girl was crying into her mother's shoulder. And the teacher ran over right away to say, oh my gosh, did she fall down? Is she hurt? Did somebody hurt her feelings on the last day? And she goes over to say, is everything okay? And the mother just kind of gives her that signal. No, everything's fine. She's sorry that school is over. Well, we're not in the business to make kids cry. But if you're going to cry because school is finished for the year and summer is starting, I'd say our teachers, our families, and our kids have done something right. And so as you get to know us better, I'm now going to turn it over to Robin Nichols, who's our incredible interim director and just has had an incredible start to this school year. Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the lower school.
Thank you so much, John, for that wonderful introduction. Again, my name is Robin Nichols. I am the interim director of the lower school. I can't believe this is my 24th year serving as an educator, and 20 of those years I've been serving in independent schools, and this is my 4th year serving at Flint Hill. And I would like for Megan Adar to go ahead and introduce herself. Megan?
Thank you, Robin. As Robin mentioned, I'm Megan Dar. I am the interim assistant director, Robin's partner in crime here in the lower school. This is my 9th year. I've had the pleasure of serving in multiple roles here at Flint Hill over the last several years, including the admission office. But my passion is really student-centered. And this is my 18th year as part of the independent school educational community.
Thank you so much, Megan. Can you see my presentation?
Yes, Robin.
All right, wonderful. We hope by the end of this presentation, first of all, that you truly get a sense of how much Megan and I love being part of this amazing lower school community. And the second thing is that you are taking away so many pertinent nuggets about why Flint Hill is the school for you as a family, and for your child. So during this time, what does learning look like in the lower school? As John mentioned, and also as Jennifer mentioned, we are extremely intentional and deliberate about every decision that we make, whether it comes to curriculum, our social emotional development, when it comes to developing our students, anything that we do pertaining to our students, they always remain at the center and the core of every decision that we make. Also, most importantly, everything that we do aligns with the mission and the vision of this amazing institution known as Flint Hill School. The next thing is that hopefully by the time that we finish with our slides and our presentation, you truly understand that we focus on the whole child. Academics is extremely important to us, but without the emotional, social foundation in place, the academics cannot take place and your child won't be able to flourish. So we also focus on academics, but we also focus on the social, emotional aspect as well. We are a Flint Hill school and we are all about process. And that means that we're focusing on the why. So, when I was growing up, it was all about here's a worksheet, complete the worksheet, take the test is graded, you move on to the next topic. At Flint Hill, we are completely different here. We are helping students to understand, to have a joy and a love for learning. And what does that sound like? And what does that look like? And putting students in position to take meaningful risks in the classroom, which means creating comfortable spaces for students in the classroom as well. We always talk about the portrait of the Flint Hill student, and these are kind of main competencies that we truly look for. So by the time a student graduates from Flint Hill, they are self-directed learners. They are problem solvers. We're training them to become leaders and effective communicators. So starting at a very early age, as little as our littlest Huskies, junior kindergartners, we are having them in front of the classroom and helping them to know what it means to say a speech or to share something really important to them, to their classmates. Most importantly, we want to develop and cultivate ethical citizens at Flint Hill School. Prior to our realignment, the lower school was devised of grades junior kindergarten through 4, and the middle school was 5 through 8. And right before the realignment 2 years ago, the former director, Sheena Hall, and I really did kind of some soul searching, and also based on research, educational research, and also schools realized that, there are benefits for students, for 5th and 6th grade students, to be with grades JK through 4, where the first thing is that we're truly specializing in the first 8 years of childhood. And it's extremely important for preteens to really understand as they grow in maturity and independence. There are so many ebbs and flows that take place with 5th and 6th graders that they really don't need those outside influences of the 7th and 8th graders. They need to be around the younger students to be the oldest Huskies, but while also receiving that nurturing that they need. Lastly, as the older students, there's also wonderful opportunities for mentorship. So our 5th and 6th grade students, and even our 4th grade students, have leadership opportunities where they're nurturing and developing and also kind of partnering with the youngest Huskies with a capstone experiencing. And that's a result that will yield positive outcomes. Megan?
Thanks, Robin. We thought it was essential that we begin tonight by sharing about how we build community. As part of our responsive classroom approach for junior kindergarten through 4th grade, we ask the student during the first 2 weeks of school to think of a hope or dream that they have for their school year. But prior to that, before school even begins, we'll call upon families to sit down with the teacher, and in this year it was virtual, of course, where families can share tidbits about their child, tell their child's story, share about things they like about school, or even things that maybe are not easy for your child. This is a great way to establish a foundational partnership, which is essential between the family and the teacher. We are really one big school family, and the first 6 weeks of school in the lower school grades, JK through 4, allows us to solidify this. The Husky Promise, as you will see, emphasizes the core values that John mentioned earlier. This is something that is part of a predictable routine every day that students engage in. Students also take an investment in these values by creating class contracts. You'll see at the top right, there's a 2nd grade example from this year, and in the bottom, that's a 5th grade example. So it's developmentally derived and appropriate using student language that they've created themselves. This is an example of another aspect of our responsive classroom approach. All of our homeroom teachers in junior kindergarten through 4th grade are responsive classroom trained, and part of their daily schedule is to engage in a morning meeting. We also have the pleasure of doing this as a whole lower school once a week. You'll notice a couple key elements that are consistent throughout all the grade levels up through 4th. There's a greeting, sharing, a group activity, and the morning message. You'll see here the kindergarten example of the morning message, where again, it's developmentally guided to teach early literacy skills. Today, I was fortunate to join this kindergarten lower lower school morning meeting. And in KA, you'll see the student in the middle. He's actually been chosen to go up and pick out the sight words. So as John and Robin have mentioned earlier, everything we do is intentional and integrated. So we sort of hide the learning, if you will. And there's a lot of it happening where, as John mentioned earlier, students don't even realize that they're really learning because it's serving their needs and their passion and purpose.
So as Megan mentioned, in JK through 4, we focus on responsive classroom. In 5 through 6 is a continuation of responsive classroom, or also a step up, which is known as developmental designs. This is an example of a CPR slide, which is known as a circle of power and respect. So very similar to the students in JK through 4, students in grades 5, 6 also sit in a circle, and they greet each other with a specific greeting. They share, and they also have an activity. If you notice on the right-hand column, you will see there's a morning message every morning. We start the same way every single morning, and we have a student to volunteer to read the morning message. And then right here, you see that the greeting is a language greeting. So the student has an option to choose whichever language that they want to say good morning to their classmate. It is very important that students are speaking with confidence, that they're speaking clearly and articulately. Not only that, but they're giving each other eye contact. So we're also demonstrating and helping students to understand through the circle of power and respect what it means to be an effective communicator. We also have a share, and then we also have an activity. This is really to create a collaboration with students. So this is, CPR is just so incredibly wonderful. And, also, responsive classroom with the morning meeting with new students to the Flint Hill community, to be able to constantly communicate and to build relationships with the current students at Flint Hill. This is an example of the first 6 weeks of school that we focus on. If you notice that Megan mentioned, everything we do is very intentional. So we are not really starting with academics on the first day. We want to build a very solid and healthy foundation. We are all about building community. This is extremely important with the teacher-student relationship, but also with parents and also with the school. Your partnership is so incredibly important. And when you decide to come here and make Flint Hill part of your family, you'll see just how amazing this community is. You'll see examples here that we're not just asking students to be great students or great classmates, but we're asking them, what do you do? What does it sound like? What does it not sound like? And so we're having these very thoughtful and intentional conversations with our students. We're really taking time during the day to model for them and to help them to understand what the expectation is at Flint Hill. And also, when we have what we call our essential agreements, we don't necessarily call them rules, we call them essential agreements. These are things that we abide by and that we agree to. So we're not just saying to them, walk quietly in the hallway. We're saying, why do you think it's important to walk quietly in the hallway? Students will do, well, there are classrooms doors that are open, and we want to be respectful of those students who are learning. These are not kind of parroted responses. These are responses what students are actually saying to us. And so we understand the benefit of really taking the time to help students understand what it means to be in a great classroom. What does it feel like to be in a great classroom? Well, it's happy, it's peaceful, it's comfortable. It's clean, it's warm and inviting. What does it look like? Students are transitioning quietly. What does it sound like? Their giggles, laughter, 6-inch voices, meaning that they're not screaming, but there's fun taking place in the classroom. What I love the best is the center one here is that, how do you do your best work? So there are students already beginning to understand, I work better if I work with a team, or I really work better when I work with a partner, or, sometimes I just want to work independently. We are really taking the time to meet students exactly where they are, and then we are building the expectation, as opposed to some schools that have the expectation and expect students to be there. What we do is we understand each individual student for who they are and what they can accomplish and what they can achieve, and give them the love and the support and the nurturing that they need to be their best selves. Again, here we are all about building community. You see in the upper left-hand corner, we have the 4th grade on one side of the fence, and we have our junior kindergarten. So we have buddies. Each classroom is paired up with another classroom. This particular day, the students were doing interviewing each other and kind of doing an activity. And if you notice, they have on their masks and they are separated, using the fence. So even though COVID was, kind of a deterrent for us, it definitely did not stop us from being creative. It's one of the many things I love about Flint Hill is that we didn't let a global pandemic stop us from learning and stop the students from really thriving, becoming their best selves. If you notice on the right, we have students outside on their iPads, and these are school issued iPads with school issued applications on their iPads. So anything that they're doing on their iPad, as John mentioned, they're not glued to their iPad all day, but there are times that they are connected to their iPads, and we want to make sure that it's productive learning. At the bottom, you'll see one of our 6th grade teachers, Charlotte Simmons, who is having a conversation with the students. And this is all about the teacher-student relationship that is so incredibly important here at Flint Hill. Megan?
Thanks, Robin. Going off of the relationship piece that Robin just mentioned, it's really vital in the lower school that every child feel known and valued, but also that they value each other. And relationships is not just important in the student-teacher role, but also peer-to-peer. We start very early on with kindness, and that's part of our wellness program in the junior kindergarten, and it extends through 6th grade. So as Robin said, we ask students to strategize and share thoughts around how to accomplish their goals, and that includes with how to be kind. Another example of how we build relationships is beyond the school classroom into special classes. So these are junior kindergartners doing different explorations in computer science and music. The same classroom expectations and values extend into these opportunities. And it's a great way for our youngest Huskies to break away from their classroom environment and take a meaningful risk, which John talked about earlier.
As you can see right here, continuing on relationship building, this is a picture of our lower school librarian, Michelle Plout. And this is our newly renovated library. It's such an amazing space for our Huskies. And this is more of a developmental time for our students. So it's not just about the students going into the library and picking a book. It's very structured time. And then there's also some exploration time for the students to, choose a book of their liking, to sit down, and begin to read the book if they like, to check out books, or just to roam around the library and see if there are other books to their liking. But when we read to our students, we're not just reading to them, but we're asking them very specific, open-ended questions to help engage and help connect to their learning. So anytime that they are listening to a book, we're calling on students or we're asking students very specific questions. Again, it's all about the connections and the deep thinking that we really want to provide opportunities for our students. I love this picture. A 6th grade student actually took this picture during recess. Relationships is so incredibly important at Flint Hill. And this is a picture of the entire 6th grade playing a ball game during break. If you notice the students who are on the ropes, they didn't necessarily play. They were just more spectators. But it's just an example of how wonderful the students are. We give them a ball and they get together and they want to do something collectively as a class. This is all about building community, building family with Flint Hill. Even though they are 6th graders and, developmentally during that time, they have specific friends that they tend to gravitate towards, but they definitely rise to the expectation when we ask students to work together as a community and to come together, for all students, for newly admitted students, or also for current students to work together as a wonderful community. The power of play. This is very important at Flint Hill. We truly value the importance of play. And this is rather dramatic play with our littlest Huskies or on the playgrounds that you see here. It's such an integral time because it's truly designed to develop executive functioning skills. It's all about self-regulation as well. And as I mentioned earlier, developing the social emotional skills are pertinent for students at Flint Hill. What does it look like to be a friend? What does it sound like? How do we collaborate and how do we problem solve? With our oldest Huskies, they also involve in play too, as well as you saw in our previous picture. This is extremely important because we use play for 5th and 6th grade in role playing by using advisory time to really talk through scenarios. And if you notice during 5th and 6th grade, it's a very, very intricate time for our 5th and 6th graders. There's plenty of ebbs and flows with the social, emotional development of students during that time. So how to handle disagreements in a respectful way, how to collaborate with group projects. If you have a classmate that's not necessarily pulling their weight, how do you communicate to that student in a respectful way? and really using those strategies. So when that student is kind of positioned in that opportunity in real time, they can kind of pull from their toolkit and really apply the strategies that they learned. Megan?
This is a photo that I personally selected because I think it also demonstrates that play is purpose-driven at Flint Hill as well. And for us, play is really the work our children do every day. This is an example of a project I was fortunate to lead last year when I taught a second grade class. The second graders noticed that there were a lot of computer boxes laying around from a recent Apple refresh that we were fortunate to have. And they wondered what they could do with them. Aligned with that, they also were hoping and proposing to possibly create an opportunity for them to watch a movie as a class community activity. So when they made this proposal, they submitted it to me in writing. And then using their oral communication skills, we had a meeting. We then took it to our since retired director. And student engagement was one of her objectives throughout the year, even during COVID. So we were fortunate to get the movie approved. And then we engaged in play around the engineering and design thinking process. And so students were posed the challenge to use the box to create a vehicle for them to sit and watch the movie with the design constraint that it must fold back up into its original form. So we use this type of language. We don't ever dumb down vocabulary for our students. And you'll see throughout the presentation that students are encouraged to engage around meaningful words related to questions and curiosities. And so this is an example of another opportunity for play in our innovation lab with our younger students. Our kindergartners visited the innovation lab, and this is an opportunity for unstructured play, but again, around the same concepts of learning how things work, how different parts come together. And on the Lego wall, which is in the back of our innovation space, students' work remains. So it's sort of a mural or a time capsule, if you will, for the year. And it's a great way for students to connect with each other's work in an interactive setting.
We are all about fostering a love for the process of learning, not necessarily the product, but the process of learning. We want students from the lower school to really understand the why. Why are they learning this? To help kind of really spark that imagination and also their brain in order to ask those higher order thinking questions, what I call the deep dive questions, not just the surface questions, those open-ended questions that are really going to help them to grow and help them to look at learning in a different way. We are all about inquiry-based learning. If you see the quote at the bottom, I say this quite a bit to many parents, is that the lower school teachers, we're facilitators. We're not the sages on the stage. The students in the classroom are really helping us to facilitate our learning. So very rarely when you walk into a lower school classroom, you are going to get students are going to get a closed-ended question. They won't be able to say yes or no. That doesn't exist at Flint Hill. It's all about the why. So example, these are science questions that we would tend to ask students during a particular lab is, what is the yellow part in the center of a flower? Why do you think it's yellow? What is the purpose? Why are petals different colors? Why does it have so many pricklies? Of the seeds. What happens when plants die? Why do you think they die? What happens after they die? So every time a student gives us an answer, we always kind of come back with, well, why do you think that? Let's investigate that further. Is there any evidence to support that? So it's not just a yes or no in the Flint Hill classroom. It's really helping students to understand what learning sounds like and what it means in the classroom. Megan?
And this goes about by first asking students to set individualized learning goals. This is an example taken recently from a class who brainstormed what learning goals they could come up with together, and then students picked from these. Similar to setting the hope and dream, this is a more specific, explicit way of setting goals for each other to think through their next steps as learners. Students also begin to learn and understand how they learn best. So is it kinesthetic? Is it auditory? Is it visual? By third grade, these ideas are solidified, but not set in stone, but rather malleable. This is an example of two different learning activities where students realized that they would benefit from using manipulatives. Our math program allows for this resource-rich learning opportunity and constant growth. So students are extending their thinking, they're using manipulatives, they're finding multiple ways to solve problems. And that's really the foundation of our investigations math program. And as you see on the right, it starts as early as kindergarten. Another part of the learning process of engaging in a self-directed experience is self-monitoring and self-regulation. This is not just from a social emotional standpoint with wellness, but it's also as learners. So it's learning to use executive skills like checklists. It's learning to self-check your work. And we start to model this in first grade through our writer's workshop method, as well as other guided learning opportunities where, again, the teacher is the facilitator. In no means are they imparting information to the student. They're asking the student to take these steps. And this is all part of our self-directed learning goal for the Flint Hill student. Another thing that Robin mentioned earlier in the science questions is we ask students to come up with and derive their own questions to help them understand and create a culture of thinking in our classroom. So this is an example of a science experiment around plants. And the objective that the teacher had was to gain understanding around a controlled variable. So the variable in this case that students were controlling for was sunlight. You'll see on the right that the student took an active role as thinking like a scientist to come up with their hypothesis and then use their skills to draw like a scientist and document their observations over time. On the bottom left corner, that's the teacher facilitating the activity. So you saw the questions earlier that Robin referenced. This is an example of how the teacher would guide those questions and curiosities through a thinking routine. We're fortunate at Flint Hill through generous professional development opportunities to have been able to work as a faculty with Project Zero based out of Harvard School of Education. This is the idea that thinking routines can lead to deeper meaning and purpose for learning beyond facts and memorization, but really providing students with methods to think through things and not have it be simply surface. Extending upon that, John mentioned that social entrepreneurship is at the heart of our learning community at Flint Hill. And while that's apparent, especially with the older grades in the upper school, it really is rooted in the lower school. You'll see on the left, a student brainstormed in their thinking journal ways that they believed they could work to have their own business one day. On the right, a student created a passion project to explore her understanding and curiosity around Vice President Kamala Harris. So she used different mediums, including the iPad, to research. And the research skills were the teacher's objective, but the learning and the idea behind it was all student-driven. Our innovation space, as I mentioned earlier, is a resource-rich environment. Not only do they do engineering and design thinking opportunities, but the goal of the lab is really not to create a separate project atmosphere, but to integrate the learning. So the kindergarten recently explored lines, and they did an inquiry-based study of it where the students asked questions about where lines might exist. They actually went around the lower school with their iPads and took pictures of different examples of lines, from the windows to pencils to the floor, and how they saw lines on the floor and patterns. And then they went into the lab, and we are fortunate to have a manipulative in there called strawbees. They're exactly what they sound like. They're straws, but they're extra long, and they have different connectors that allow you to create 3D objects. So this was an awesome opportunity for our younger Huskies to start to build foundations around geometry, in essence. But for them, this was play, this was discovery.
So as you see right here, this is our science lab. And at Flint Hill, the sixth graders are our oldest Huskies. And the privilege for being a sixth grader at Flint Hill is that they have the fourth floor all to themselves. This is our science lab. This is for students in grades 4 through 6. It's a very hands-on approach that we have at Flint Hill. Of course, we are a one-to-one school, so all the students have iPads, but we also understand the important opportunities to provide students to have hands-on activities as well. And science is definitely one of those subjects. So you can see the students are preparing for an activity. Aisha Snell, who is our social studies and science department chair, is kind of going over the expectations. The students are wearing their gloves and they are getting ready for their science experiment. As I mentioned before, we are a process school. So, when I was growing up, is like I said, I was given a worksheet and I finished the worksheet and they graded it and I had a grade on it. And then I moved on. And then 2 days later, I really didn't retain anything because it was all about memorizing what was going to be on the test. So I really didn't necessarily have anything stored in my long-term memory or really understood the why. And so we do not have grades in grades junior kindergarten through 6th grade. Grades are implemented starting in the middle school. So instead of using grades, we use rubrics. This is an opportunity of extending the learning and helping students to understand the why. This is a rubric from one of my accelerated math classes. I also taught accelerated math for a couple years at Flint Hill while I served as assistant director. And as you notice here, there are 3 columns. We have the approaches column, the meets column, and the exceeds column. If you notice on the left-hand side, these are the actual problems that the students had to complete. So it's not just about giving me an answer or giving the math teacher an answer. We want an answer, but we also want to know the why. If you notice on the right-hand side, the student has to be able to justify or support their answer using, the concepts and the skills that were taught. So for this particular investigation, we talked a great deal about the distributive property, the least common multiple, helping students to make those connections. So if they approach something, that means that they tried with the answer, they still had a ways to go, they didn't necessarily get it correct, but there was effort given. If you see, there's an X right there. If they meet the expectation, this is kind of the standard expectation that we have at Flint Hill. And if you see the X's there, I just don't have the X's there, but I also give the students very, very thorough feedback. And I try to make it, and all of our teachers try to be as, understanding as we can, but also very motivating as well. Exceeds, again, is not just about giving us the answer mathematically. We are also all about helping students to understand multiple ways to complete math problems. It's not just solving a problem or an algebraic expression in one way, but we expose students to multiple ways of doing that based on their learning style and based on their comfort zone and what works best for them. But it's not only about just giving us the answer. They have to be able to justify their answer with sufficient support. And they have to be able to use mathematical expressions and vocabulary and even notations that they've learned in class. And this is what is known as an exceed, that they are going above and beyond to demonstrate their learning and to make the connections, which is so incredibly important at Flint Hill School. This is a phrase that we hear quite a bit at the lower school. We make the learning visible. So there'll never be an opportunity for you as a parent, if you decide to join the Husky family, that you will have no idea what your child is doing. We have a digital portfolio called Seesaw that students use to visualize their learning and to make it visible for you. And Megan's going to talk a little more about that using the science experiment. Megan?
Thanks, Robin. This is an example. We actually were fortunate to pull many examples that you saw this evening from Seesaw directly. Our teachers are masterful communicators with this platform, but in all honesty, your student becomes one as well. And this goes back to John's point about teaching our students to act with integrity and responsibly with their device, but also to better understand how they can best communicate. I know I am a parent myself, and I often will ask my children, "What did you do at school today?" And as a teacher, I have to just grit my teeth when I hear nothing or I went to recess. It's always aggravating to me. And Seesaw has really allowed our family to hone in on our child's daily experience. It's great because you'll get a notification and photos like this will appear on your device. It's almost like a personal window into your child's daily experience. So when you pick them up from the carpool line or at aftercare, you'll notice that you already have insights into their daily experience and you can connect with them. This is an example of a fifth grader's post recently about an experiment they did in the lab that Robin showcased earlier. Students are taught to document through photos and drawings and to think like a scientist. This goes back to the Project Zero work that our teachers have done as facilitators. So you'll see that the student used the 5 senses here. That's another hallmark of thinking like a scientist, and also documented before they chewed their gum and after. So again, it's taking real life examples from their daily life and experience that really helps harness the passion and interest in the skill development we're looking for. This is the Lines project I mentioned earlier in reference to the Innovation Lab. This is the way that the teacher documents it, though. And our teachers are so fortunate to have the department chair model that Robin referenced earlier. And these department chairs are also thought partners. They're an integral part of each class community that they support. And they'll come in as another teacher in the classroom to document literally everything that the student says as the teacher's facilitating the lesson. This is a powerful way for us as parents, but also, and more importantly, for the teacher to have a reflection tool to go back and see what students were wondering, what were they noticing, what were they observing. These are powerful reporting mechanisms. You'll see one student also went around on the scavenger hunt I mentioned. You'll see some of the quotes. The playground structure and ropes have lines. Everything is made of lines. That's from the mouths of kindergartners. And while that seems simple, there's a lot of depth to those comments that the teacher draws upon and extends in various ways. This is another example of science where, as I said, we take basic materials and teach the method to the madness, as Robin Nichols would say. And this allows for students to practice and model making a hypothesis, making observations, and then most importantly, asking follow-up questions. These are questions that they may have the opportunity to explore at school, but you'll notice that this is a post on Seesaw. So then as a parent, you may want to extend the thinking. We get questions all the time. How can I connect what's happening at school to home? And Seesaw really allows you to do this in a real valuable, meaningful way. This is another post that a first grade teacher included on her Seesaw. And I think this is important because this is actually spelling. At first glance, you would never guess that, but spelling is not the spelling that I learned as a student growing up. And this is true of all the innovative techniques that we use. But with spelling, we're not just asking students to regurgitate or memorize. We're looking at phonemic features to build phonological awareness and understanding. And that extends all the way up through 4th grade, where they look at derivations, and that builds into our amazing Latin program that we have in middle and upper school. So as John talked about the through line, everything we do is extremely intentional and rooted in building a strong core for our students to be successful in the long run.
As I mentioned earlier, with the few hats that I wear as an administrator, I'm also last year, for the past 2 years, actually served as accelerated math teacher. And this is an actual Seesaw account from a student that was really asking or answering a question that I had for the students during a math class. And so the question was, how and why can 2 fractions be equivalent? And the expectation is for the student to describe, explain, or draw to support their answer below. And so before they got to that, I always like to help students to understand and to guide their thinking, to really help them to go back and, again, be the self-directed learner. So they're going back and they're saying, you know, by the time they finish answering this very specific question with details, of course, does this explanation accurately and clearly demonstrate what to do in each step to solve the problem? Does it accurately explain how they solved each step? And are they using accurate mathematical language to correctly explain the steps? So again, it's not this rudimentary being able to answer a question or regurgitate an answer or put it on there and being focused on how fast they can do it. I always say to my math students, slow and steady always wins the race, right? And so with a mathematician, you have to think like a mathematician. It's not a competition. You're running your own race. And so whether you are able to finish the problem quickly, whether you're the last person, it doesn't really matter, because what we want to do is create an environment of learners where each person is comfortable with who they are as learners. As you can see, this response is very thorough. They give, this particular student gave several examples and made very, very clear connections to what I was talking about in the future, in the investigations that we talked about as a class. This student actually took it a step further and decided to create a visual to support his answer. And so many sixth grade students assume that because the answer is lengthy, that means that's an exceeds, and not necessarily the case. But I could tell that this student was very deliberate and intentional in the language that he used, the mathematical terminology that I talked about in class to make the connections. And this student actually received an exceeds. But this is just an example of sixth grade accelerated math. And so this is based on our investigations program as well, where we truly take a deep dive into mathematics. It's not about how fast we're going. We're not moving at a supersonic speed. We're actually taking our time and we're helping the students to make connections. They're working collaboratively in groups. I'm the facilitator. And so I pose a question to them and I let them work. I let them explore so they can see what the connections are. So when that light bulb goes off, then they're able to have the rich and meaty conversations that we love so dearly in each and every one of our Flint Hill school classrooms. Megan?
So how are students able to access all this amazing content and learning? How are they able to ask amazing questions that take them a step further? It's really because we promote the idea of mindfulness as a directed, explicit learning opportunity each day throughout our JK through 6 classrooms. Many of our homeroom teachers have had the benefit of being trained in this practice, and our wellness curriculum emphasizes it. As Robin mentioned, our students have a toolkit, and mindfulness is part of that. Through a daily practice, students engage in mindful time, whether it's coming in from recess and quieting and calming their body with a body scan, or after lunch and after recess in the afternoon, taking a rest for a short, brief 10-minute break where they listen and use their sensory skills to calm themselves down and manage their stress.
Speaking of stress, at Flint Hill, we are all about helping students understand who they are as learners. Again, we are all about focusing on the whole child. So yes, it's about academics, but it's also helping students to understand what it looks like in a classroom when you're taking meaningful risks. And in order for students to take meaningful risks, the classroom has to be conducive to that. So it has to be a safe space. It has to be a welcoming space. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they won't experience stress, but it does mean that they will be exposed to calming down strategies. So when they have those butterflies in their stomach, or when they learn about the fight or flight response, what happens to your body when you're going through a stressful situation. And sometimes all stress isn't necessarily bad stress. Sometimes it helps us. And so helping to identify what that looks like and what that sounds like is so incredibly important. That starts as early as our junior kindergartners all the way up to 6th grade. As you see here, this 3rd grader had some really wonderful calming down strategies for herself that she learned within the first 6 weeks of school. She learned to do a calm down countdown. She wanted to do some belly breathing. So she realized she had those little butterflies in her stomach and she focused on her breathing. Positive self-talk. You can do it. I know you can do it. Keep trying. Thinking of a relaxing place to enjoy. This doesn't mean that students, like I said, won't experience the stress. But what we want to do is to create a toolbox for students. So when they come across those roadblocks, when they're trying to take that meaningful risk and it doesn't go necessarily as planned, we want them to implement a growth mindset. We want them to understand about grit, about resilience, what it means to face challenges. You're going to face challenges, and not all of those challenges are going to be successful. But what does that mean when you don't come across a challenge that is not successful? How can you recover from that? What does that look like? What does that sound like? And really creating an environment for students to help, quote unquote, grow their brain. We want students to be able to take those risks. And when they get older, they do. They want to take those risks. They want to stand in front of the classroom and present. They speak eloquently. They speak with confidence. And if they don't, then they're coming to their teachers saying, I want to, can you help me? It's all about advocacy. Building that advocacy muscle is so incredibly important in the lower school because it's all about the long game, as John Thomas always mentions to us. Not, we always want to believe in the power of yet. This goes back to the growth mindset. This is an example of a fifth grade bulletin board. And so each student kind of wrote a goal that they haven't accomplished yet. This goes back to the growth mindset, like I said. So it's not to say that they will never do it. It's saying that they haven't done it yet. I actually have one of these on the board too in my office, is that, I'm 47 years old and I'm scared to swim, but I told the kids, I don't know how to swim yet. I'm going to get to it. So to help the students understand that adults still have to go through this power of yet as well. It doesn't exclude the adults, but it really includes all of us in the Flint Hill community. I could tell you, Megan and I can talk for days and days and days about the lower school. It's such an amazing place. We are so privileged and blessed to be part of this community and to lead this community of educators. And the lower school would not be the lower school without the amazing partnerships and relationships that we have with our parents. And we are so thankful that we have 3 parents with us tonight that are going to be serving on the panel. And so I would love for the parents right now to introduce themselves, if you could, to our visitors, and then we will begin, Megan and I will begin to take questions. So if we could have our wonderful parents to introduce themselves, and we'll go from there. Who would like to go first? Rock, paper, scissors? Go ahead, Alexis.
I raised my hand. I'll go first. Hi, everyone. My name's Alexis Balkasoon, and we have 3 children in the lower school. They are in 4th, 5th, and 6th grade this year. We've been at Flint Hill since our oldest started in kindergarten, so this is our 7th year, and we're so grateful to be here and have just had a wonderful experience. So I'm happy to share all that I've learned so far and all that I appreciate about the school and about the incredible faculty and staff here, and answer any questions that you might have either in this forum or separately.
Derek?
Good evening. My name is Derek Blank. It's great to see everybody tonight. My wife Colleen and I are a little bit newer to the lower school. We've been there for, last year was our first year. We have 3 children. Anderson in 3rd grade, Brinkley is in 1st grade, and then our youngest, Beckett, is just starting up in junior kindergarten. And having a great experience so far, and definitely can't wait to answer any questions that you guys have.
Thank you, Derek. And Alexis Wilson?
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Alexis Wilson. So my son started in junior kindergarten last year. He's now in kindergarten, and we have been thrilled with, experiencing Flint Hill through his eyes, and we're happy to answer any questions as well. And we're even preparing to send our youngest into JK for the 2022 school year.
Wonderful. So I'm actually going to put the parents on the spot here because they're going to have to answer a question. I'm going to have them take a meaningful risk. Guys, are you ready? Look at those smiles. I love it. It's a very simple question. Why Flint Hill? Why Flint Hill?
Yeah, I can start up. So my each of our 3 kids, I'd say, are very, very different. So for instance, my oldest, Anderson, is very analytical. He's super gung-ho about math and technology. So we love the resources that Flint Hill brings to the table with that. He even last year, during the school year, was able to kind of help with some of his classmates to create a day of math, which he was so excited about. So those little unique individual leadership opportunities were incredible. So to do that in 2nd grade, we honestly didn't think something like that would be possible. Our 1st grader, Brinkley, is a lot quieter and reserved. So it's really cool how Flint Hill kind of finds that balance of pushing her a bit out of her comfort zone with public speaking and reading and classroom activities, but still within a very like comfortable environment. So that's been really cool to see her growth at school too. So
Thank you, Derek.
I'd be happy to share some of the factors that helped us decide. So we were really blown away once we did the tour, and we saw the innovation lab and just also the whole theme of learning at Flint Hill, like the calculated risks and the linear learning. It just really resonated with us, and things just screamed Aston to us. That's our son. But there was also a real warmth about the school. When you see some of the experiences that the kids have and you talk to some of the teachers, there's a real warmth there. So it wasn't just, the opportunities that he would have with the innovation lab and the kind of learning he would have, but the warmth that went hand in hand with that really stood out to us.
Thank you. Alexis?
Yeah, I would definitely agree with both Alexis and with Derek. I mean, when we were looking, our oldest was in kindergarten, and I'm not quite sure that we even knew exactly what we were looking for because we didn't know where his interests would lie and where his strengths would be and what would be best for our family. So what brought us was probably the small class sizes and just the warm feeling that we had when we came to tour and when we spoke with other families and with the faculty and staff. And then what's really kept us and the breadth of opportunities that we saw, how Flint Hill really provided such a range of opportunities to develop the whole child, whether it was through music or through outdoor play and through innovation and through technology and athletics. It seemed to have the whole package for us. So that's probably what brought us to this school, but what for sure has kept us at the school. And my oldest started in kindergarten, my youngest started in JK because he was anxious to start once we had such an amazing experience. Is just that our children are so known. Our family is known, and not just by their teachers, definitely by their teachers. That relationship between the teachers and the students is incredible and provides just the basis of all their learning. But they're known by everyone at that school. My kids will ask me if I've seen the shoes that Mrs. Nichols is wearing on a particular day at carpool. And she's not their teacher, but they know her. And when Mrs. Dar opens the door at carpool and congratulates my child on an art contest or something like that, they're just known and they feel valued and respected, and their creativity has just soared through the lower school. It's been every year has just been it just keeps getting better and better, and we're just so grateful.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
We have some great questions here in the chat that I'd like to pose to you. Robbie, can you talk a little bit about what the philosophy is for in the approach for homework in the older grades?
Absolutely. So, in the lower school, we don't use the phrase homework. We use the phrase home learning because it's a reinforcement of what was learned in the classroom. So it's not necessarily focused on a particular amount of time that the students are working on at home. It's more of a connection for them to focus with an activity that they do with their parents, whether it's additional reading time, whether it's open-ended questions that they ask appear online, or whether they ask questions from of their parent. For home learning, again, we have study halls in 6th grade because we really want to make sure that we're creating the model and the bridge from 6 to 7. So like I said, everything that we do in 6th grade is extremely intentional, not only in preparation for middle school, but developmentally appropriate, of course, and really stretching the students and preparing them to be independent and self-sufficient as learners. And so you may, if you decide to, have Flint Hill as your community, you will notice your child, if is in 5th or 6th or any particular grade, that they won't be coming home with hours and hours of homework. That is not our goal, because the majority of the richness and the meatiness takes place in the classroom, and anything that they do outside of the classroom is more of connection time or reinforcement at home. So that's kind of the premise of home learning.
Thank you, Robin. And also, we had a question in the chat about class sizes, and Rico gave our answer of class sizes, which is we typically max them at 18. And then there was a question about ratio, and ratio is it's not necessarily tells how many students are in a classroom with students at any given time, but ratio is more about the people that work in the lower school compared to the number of students that are in the lower school. And so our lower school is very well resourced at 6-to-1 ratio. But I'd love to hear from Alexis, Derek, about what has been your experience about the number of students that have typically been in the classrooms with your kids.
Yeah, go ahead, Alexis.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we've had a range from at most we have had 18. I wouldn't say that's been maybe that's only been a couple of times in our 7 years that we've had 18. It's typically been around 15. It's funny that there was a year that we were at 18 and I wondered if that was too much. And the teacher said to me, no, I think it's really going to be great. And it's better than if it were 9. It's a, great dynamic, and it was incredible. And then the next year they were actually smaller. And then I worried, is it too small? And I've learned this lesson every year at Flint Hill, which is these things that I worry a little bit about or have a question about. One is I can always ask someone. And 2 is that any question I have or anything I've wondered about, the school has already very intentionally thought about all of that. And what they've decided to do is always been in the best interest of the children. And it's incredibly centered on the students. And every year when that happens, it just builds more and more trust. That kind of, just I think is the basis of the community in general. So.
Yeah, similarly for our family, I think typically they're still in the younger grades, but it's been 10 to 2 teachers, 12 to 2 teachers. So really very close to a very small ratio that's allowed the teachers to really cater their teaching to our individual children's learning. That's been huge for our family, and that combined with, if we do have questions, the ability to email the teacher, the response time's been incredible with that. And then probably both for my wife and I, the checking Seesaw throughout the day is like the highlight of our day. It's definitely great dinner table conversation and just the perfect spark to kind of help the kids, remind them of kind of some of the highlights of the day, so we can really, really tease a bit more out of them at the end of the day, which is really fun. So.
Our experience has been in JK, it was 11 students to 2 teachers. And then I could be wrong about the kindergarten class, but I believe it's 11 to 2 in the KB. And then just to echo what Derek and Alexa said, the communication was amazing, not just Seesaw, but if we ever had a concern, there were many opportunities that we could have spoken to John Thomas himself, to Robin, to the teachers, and I really looked forward to those Fridays too, because that's when we get most of the Seesaw pictures. But yeah, the communication was amazing.
We have some questions in the chat regarding the transition from Montessori schools, and seeing a lot of similarities between the style at Flint Hill with Montessori programs, the techniques and instruction. Mm-hmm. Robin and Megan, could you speak a little bit more about that transition and some of the similarities that you see?
Megan, you go ahead and take this one.
Sure, I can speak to that. We actually have several students matriculating in the last several years from the Montessori-based program. Obviously, in this area, there are several different Montessori-based programs, but Montessori in its classic sense, the Maria Montessori method, we do see some similarities. We also see and notice some subtle and more obvious differences, and I can elaborate a little more on what I mean by that. Obviously, the self-directed learning approach is similar to the intentionality behind Montessori. We do use checklists and routines and predictability similar to that. The one piece that we have even recently discussed with teaching teams is the collaborative integrated approaches to learning. And this is really what we were talking about around play. Play, as the Montessori program develops, delves more away from parallel play. But initially, as students transition from Montessori, we really focus around the collaboration with them. And as Robin said, we're very intentional around our language with students and our language of learning. So using questions to guide that and encourage that is paramount. Another direct link with Montessori is obviously manipulatives and using manipulatives to learn. And I think that students who come from Montessori-based programs have a lot of success with that. In our lower school, we use a guided discovery program as part of responsive classroom. So we're modeling techniques and we're not making assumptions that students already have prior knowledge, even for our returning students. So first graders, the first week of school, we're still modeling and practicing using crayons, for example. And I think Montessori is very intentional in the same way with those resources. Another aspect of Montessori that I've noticed, especially specific to this area of Virginia, is experiential education. And I saw a question earlier in the chat about how do we connect with nature. Our JK program in particular is very focused around the natural world and environment. Historically, they've had a program called Forest Friday. Recently, due to COVID, the forest has become a little closer to home and is campus-based. But historically, we have taken a field trip every Friday where JK students could do a small hike and do exactly the same types of thinking routines we talked about earlier, noticing, observing. The teacher would take pictures. In third grade, we're lucky to have Mr. Fred Atwood, our upper school naturalist and ornithologist, and he's taken his love of earth science and the ethos of our campus and brought it to our third grade. So every week he does a guided discovery with them on our campus. And typically that's outdoors. So this week they went and collected specimens. They learned to use collection devices as a real scientist would. And then of course, Seesaw was there to document the whole experience so parents at home could see. Fred is very much a notable figure on our campus, shall we say, and the kids really adore him and value him. And we've been fortunate to have him now for over 20 years. So he's very much an established enigma of our campus. We're thankful for that.
Can you speak a little bit more about our approach to discipline at Flint Hill?
Sure. It really, kind of stems from the responsive classroom and developmental design approach. I think many students initially, when they come into the lower school office, they think they're in trouble, and that's not the case. It's very intentional for me, for Megan, for us to be visible and to build a relationship with the students. So whether we're outside at carpool, whether I'm outside in a kickball game with the sixth graders, whatever we're doing, there's, as Megan said, there's kind of a method to our madness, because there are going to be times where the students are going to need to have those conversations with us, to have those teachable moments. And the students are more receptive to that because they see us as a partner. And so when they come into the office, that's a space for them, for us to solve a problem. That's the space for us to work together to find a solution. And whether it's a disagreement with a peer, whether they said some unkind words to a friend, which happens. I mean, this is the lower school. They're definitely at that developmental stage. That's totally fine. But we talk through the situation, and it's not just punitive. It's really having a discussion with the student and really using very intentional language for them to reflect. Reflection is a very important part of our lower school curriculum to help the students understand the why. Like, why did I do that? Well, I was a bit frustrated because they wouldn't let me kick the ball when I wanted to. Well, what's another way you can handle that in the future? How could you, what are some strategies that you can incorporate in the future? So it's not necessarily punitive. It's more really having a conversation with them. If there is a disagreement, or if a student, decides to, to get into a verbal argument or something otherwise, the student, we have each student take part in what we call an apology of action. So it's not just saying I'm sorry, but helping them to go through the process of reflection and either writing a letter to that other student or creating a project to show, how sorry they are for their actions. So this is really about taking ownership for their behavior. And not only that, the very key component of the apology of action is how do they plan to act differently the next time? And then we hold them to that. And if they fall short, that's okay too. This is a journey. I always love to kind of identify lower school as a journey. It's not a perfect journey. There are bumps, there are bumps in the road, there are roadblocks, there are detours, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that, because every single lower school student is going to make it to the destination. But each student has their own personal journey. And that's what I love about Flint Hill, is that we are not kind of designating every single student to follow the same pathway. That's what makes all the students at lower school so incredibly unique. And that's one of the many reasons why I love Flint Hill, is because we see students for who they truly are. And we want to make sure that that they have a sense of belonging at the lower school. That's so incredibly important to us.
We've got a question for our parents regarding community parent involvement. What are examples of ways that our families have gotten involved in the school, both in or together, inside and outside of school? Can you talk a little more about the parent relationship? Alexis, and Derek, who would like to go first?
I can go. So yeah, I mean, it's been a little strange because of COVID. So we've had fewer opportunities in the last year to do that, but it's slowly coming back, which is wonderful. The first year my son started in kindergarten, I was really busy and I had littles at home and still working. And so I wasn't as involved, but what I did do is come every month to the open classroom, which is once a month. I was able to come into the classroom and with all the other parents and see and have my child show me what they were most proud of, what they've been working on, what they were learning. And that's always one of my favorite times. And then as I got one carpool drop off and everyone was in the same place, I had a little bit more time. I started to volunteer. I was able to be at the school more often, and volunteering is where I've made some great friendships, and where I became our family became more personally invested in the school. The more we give to the school, certainly the more we get back in terms of, the time and energy, and just getting to see how much time and energy so many people at that school put in to being there, supporting our kids. In terms of social activities, my favorite is probably homecoming, which I never would have thought as a lower school parent would mean anything to me, but it's almost more fun, I swear, for the lower school families than the upper school students. There's a big bonfire the night before, and all the lower school kids are running around on the football field, and they get glow sticks at dark. And there's in the past, we've had cotton candy and hot chocolate, and parents are getting to get together and talk while kids are playing. And then we do the same thing in the winter. There's Winter Fest, and in the spring, there's Spring Fest. And there's just a lot of opportunities we have coming up. And then I think next week we have a lower school parent social at a local restaurant that's owned by a Flint Hill alum family, and where lower school parents can get together if we can get babysitters. And so there are lots of opportunities to get involved, no pressure to get involved. Like I said, I wasn't my first year, but the more that I was, the more connected I was to the whole community. So.
And I know Derek and Alexis, you've had a little bit of a different experience joining us during the pandemic. But I know that our Parents Association did put on a lot of virtual events and try to connect our new families. But do you have anything you'd like to share?
I think even with the virtual, capacity, we never felt not connected. We always felt that there were people we could reach out to and that we were a part of something. So we were really grateful for that.
Yeah, same with our family. Even though we're a newer pandemic family, we've definitely we had an opportunity before COVID to actually attend homecoming, which was a huge selling point of us wanting to be part of the Flint Hill community. It's, I think, just the age range of students at Flint Hill and seeing the older middle school and high school students helping out the lower school students just in a variety of ways. To see that up close and in person was incredible. My wife, Colleen, is all about, she's counting down the minutes until she can get in to volunteer and help out at the school. So I know she's really excited for when the right time of that comes around. So no, we're super excited for that.
Thank you. We have our last question for this evening. And I'm going to throw that question out to Robin and Megan, but I want to just let everyone know, if you've posted a question in chat and you haven't gotten your specific answer, Rico, Jennifer, and I are definitely absolutely, we'll go through them and we'll make sure that you do have that answer that you're looking for, or direct you to some of our experts here that are with us this evening, as in Robin and Megan and John, and of course our wonderful parent panel. So our last question for the evening is, do we have dedicated subject teachers and specialist teachers? Can you talk about what that looks like in lower school?
Sure. So in junior kindergarten through fourth grade, we do have, it is a self-contained model actually through fifth grade, meaning that they spend the majority of the time in their classrooms. We do have Spanish classes. Spanish, we have PE, we have library, we have music, we have art and wellness. And so those students, luckily this year, the students are able to transition to those specific rooms. Last year for COVID, we had all of our specialist teachers on carts in the hallway going to the classrooms, and the students had to actually stay in the classroom. So it's so wonderful to see the students transitioning in the hallway. In grade 6 is more of what we call a departmental model. And again, we're talking about that bridge from 6 to 7. And so with the 6th graders having the 4th floor all to themselves, they actually have what we call advisors. So they're no longer in homerooms, but they're in what we call advisories. And they have, their language arts teacher, or known as their English teacher. Every student at Flint Hill takes Spanish, and then in 7th grade, 7th and 8th grade, and they have the option of exploring other foreign languages. And they also have math, they have social studies, they have science. And so the transitions definitely take place more in 6th grade. The 5th graders even have an opportunity to transition to different math teachers. That's just simply across the hall, but it's definitely more developmentally appropriate as opposed to the 6th graders who are definitely kind of traveling up and down the stairwell. We also have music classes as well. Starting in 5th grade, students have an option of choosing a specific selection or a strand. So they either have to choose between orchestra, percussion, band, or choir. And they stick to that strand for 2 years. And then when they move on to 7th grade, then they have that opportunity to expand on that strand or to change. But really 5th and 6th grade, actually JK through 6 is really an exploration for them to really find out who they are as learners and what their interests are. And yes, 6th graders, all kids have recess, JK through 6. So they have 2 breaks in the morning. They have one in the morning, and they also have one right before or after lunch.
Thank you, Robin. And I'll also add, before we segue, that we also have playgrounds on our middle school campus too, and love for our middle schoolers and upper schoolers to get outside throughout the day as well. Well, right now we'll head into the admissions presentation. So thank you, Robin. Thank you, Megan. Thank you, John. Thank you to our parents. I've really enjoyed saying Alexis, and Derek. That's been a lot of fun. Thank you for all of your great insight today. And so this next part, I'm going to walk through the admission process and tell you a little bit about next steps. So before we go through the process itself, I'd like to talk a little bit about the experience. So at Flint Hill, our admission team, everybody at our school, we love getting to know new families. We love forming the relationships. This is often the beginning of a several year partnership between us. And so we approach this with really open dialogue, just like we do throughout the entire partnership. So we bring our transparent selves. We ask that families also bring their transparent selves, and just see this as a time to get to know each other and enjoy getting to know each other. We just like we don't want a lot of pressure on our students. We don't want families to feel pressure going through this process. We really hope that you'll enjoy it. So what does the process look like? So on your screen are all of the things that are required. The first step is submitting an application form. That takes 15 to 20 minutes to complete. You can find the link anywhere on our website, the Apply Now button. It's also there on your screen. After you spend the 15 to 20 minutes to submit the application form itself, our office processes that within about 24 to 48 hours, and then you'll have a checklist appear in the same system that you completed the application. The system's called Husky Hub, appropriately, and the checklist is a live checklist. So as you submit things, you'll see that we've received it after the processing period of 24 to 48 hours, and then you can keep track of what's still missing. So the items that you'd be required to submit, you can attach these to the application form if you have them handy. If not, don't let it hold up getting the form in. You can upload them later to the checklist. And so transcript, progress reports from all from school attended. Of course, for our JK students and our K students, most of the time, we are waiving this if they have not been in a formal school environment or a formal setting. Recommendation from a current teacher. So we do ask, there's a recommendation form in our system. So you just enter the teacher's email address and their name, and our system pings out the application form to them. And again, for if your child hasn't been in a school setting, then you can talk with Dawn or Rico about that. But we'd likely waive that or ask for someone else who has been close to them. Parent questionnaire is asks several questions to help us start to get to know your family. Testing, we for grades JK to 2, we require the Gazelle, and we do that in-house. So on that checklist, you will have a link to signing up for the Gazelle, and you just schedule an appointment with us. We are offering a virtual or on campus, and it's an observation test that your child comes in and their experience is playing with Miss Holly. No preparation required for that at all. For the other grades, 3 through 6, we don't require any specific test, but if you've taken, or your child's taken, of course, any of the tests that are listed there, we ask you to submit that throughout the application process. It's really useful for us to have at least one of these. So we ask you to submit that. And then the parent guardian interview, that is when you'll meet with, the parents will meet with Dawn or with Rico and talk about the possibility of the partnership and just really talk to each other to make sure that we're all a great fit for each other. In terms of the timeline, the admission applications open now. So if you are thinking of applying, now would be the time. Again, that application form really gets you on our radar, and then Dawn and Rico are working really closely with you to make sure that you don't have any blind spots throughout this process. They are going to help you anticipate all of the other things on this list. So that is the key to that. October right now, you're scheduling admission interview. So getting it on the calendar, it doesn't need to take place in October, but you want to schedule it now as the schedules do fill up. You want to schedule it as soon as possible. Same with the test that you would be scheduling would be the Gazelle. And again, the link to schedule both the interview and the Gazelle pop up in the checklist. So you can do that electronically. In November, you'll be requesting the recommendations from the current teachers. It gives, we say November because it gives the teachers an opportunity to get to know your child and provide a more meaningful recommendation. Also, this is when you would request schools to be sent at the end of the term. November 1st is when the financial aid application opens. December, the application deadline, you'll see a little bit ahead, is January 21st, but we recommend you have everything complete by the end of December. And this is just because we really want you to get a admission decision on decision day, which is on March 4th. In order to receive a decision on March 4th, you do need to have all of your materials complete by that January 21st deadline. And just in case there is trouble getting in touch with a recommender, or there's some document that we're having trouble getting. Again, the schedule for interviews and Gazelles fill up. If you're aiming for the end of December to have all this done, you're really setting yourself up for success in case we have to overcome any obstacles. Then we have a couple weeks to do that and still have your application complete by that January 21st deadline. And then the financial aid applications due a couple days after. So that's due on the 25th, if that's something that you're considering. For March, the 4th is the decisions go out. The next week is when we have revisit events on campus. If you'd like to come visit us again. And then in April, we celebrate that we found each other and that we're starting this beautiful partnership with our mission and your children at the very center of that partnership. And that's when the fun really starts. And then in May, we'll have a new family information night to make sure that you have all the information you need during the summer. We'll have some socials for you to meet other families, current families, other new families. As the school year is approaching. We also send out a newsletter every other week to make sure that you are you're staying in the loop of everything you need to know, whether it's about the socials or about any of the forms or other things that's required for your child to start with us. And finally, how do you connect? So you're at an admission event. Great. You're connecting. You're off to a really great start. I know some of you have already submitted the application. So thank you for that. You're already on your way also. There are other events. We have an on-campus event. October 21st, a lower school information session. October 23rd is a lower school innovation workshop. There's a few other events. They'll be on our website. You'll get emails. You're on our list. We'll make sure that you're invited. We also have previous events that have been recorded are on our virtual events website. If you scroll down and look at the archive, you can schedule a phone consultation, a virtual meeting, also a tour, which isn't on there, with Dawn or Rico at any point. That's also on the admission website. And you can follow us on social media. All of our social media channels are linked at the bottom of our webpage. You really get to see inside of our classrooms and what's going on a day-to-day basis, at Flint Hill. That link at the bottom is what you will use to schedule those phone consultations, virtual meetings, tours with Dawn and Rico. And so we are really grateful that you've joined us this evening. I know we've gone a few minutes over and it's getting late in the evening here, but I would absolutely invite any admission related questions or any other questions that you might have on your mind that you'd really like to get answered before you exit tonight. Feel free to pop them in the chat now. And then of course there's plenty of opportunity for us to connect in the future too, should a question arise after this evening. Okay. Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for being here. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So our job, we'll consider this a success. It sounds like we've answered a lot of your questions, and that's what we set out to do tonight. So we're really happy about that. We look forward to continuing the dialogue with all of you. Thank you so very much for joining us tonight, and hope you have a great evening, and we'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Hope to see you live at some point down the road.